You can do whatever you want in wrestling, almost literally. The amount of nonsense we've seen over the years is somewhat staggering, and that goes right down to the stakes that come with some matchups. For example, sometimes people's lives are on the line. Now that's dumb given that they always seem to come back to life, and people blame social media for killing kayfabe, and even the lesser verdicts are still otherworldly. Where else is someone's hair considered a worthy prize to fight over? Wouldn't work against me, I'm as bald as the day is long. There's a bunch of these, however, which means it only seems fair to run through some of the more eye-browsing ones to, once again, question why any of us watch wrestling to begin with. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 10 wrestling matches that carried the highest stakes. Number 10, Brock Lesnar wants to take over Raw. A lot of what happened in the build-up to this feud is forgotten now, mainly due to how good the match was, and that result. But when we were hyping up John Cena versus Brock Lesnar at Extreme Rules 2012, which also happened to be Brock's first match back with the WWE in years, we were basically told that Lesnar was gonna lose. Why? Well, during the Raw when it was time to sign the contract, Lesnar made a bunch of demands before jotting his name down. Firstly, he wanted all wrestling decisions to be run by him, then he asked for Mr. McMahon's private jet as well as a $500,000 fine waived. If he was victorious too, the Beast wanted Raw to be renamed Monday Night Raw, starring Brock Lesnar. Right away, we knew what the fallout to all this was going to be, because that was never happening. Cena did have his hand raised, of course, in a truly baffling decision, but essentially, other than their hatred for one another, the pair were also fighting over the name of the show. Which, of course, makes perfect sense. Number 9, loser goes to jail. American law enforcement and Canadian law enforcement apparently couldn't get along in 1991, so each country put forth their best fighters and had them compete in a match at SummerSlam to see which nation had the most effective ways of keeping the peace. That is stupid already, made worse given the fact that whoever lost would have to spend the night in jail. Imagine wrestling was real and people actually agreed to that. This is what happened between the Big Boss Man and the Mountie, however, with the former walking away with the win and, more importantly, the chance to remain a free man. It did not go well for the Mountie though, who also took the loss quite badly. He had to be subdued by multiple officers as he was thrown in a police van and driven off into the night. We saw him get checked into the jail as he fought the whole thing tooth and nail, and it's actually quite a tough watch today given that WWE thought this would also be a great opportunity to have a gay person hit on the Mountie, because, you know, jail or something. It floundered further when the Mountie acted like this was a fate worse than death. It is somehow still fun to watch today because of how over the top it is, but yeah, approach with caution. Number 8, giving up your freedom. Who would agree to this? Honestly, no matter how much you dislike someone or how confident you are that you'll win, it's a case of risk versus reward. Anything can happen in a match, so it's probably a bad idea to decide that you're not into freedom anymore. For example, at Fall Brawl 1998, Raven requested that Saturn become his slave if he beat him. Christian Cage had something similar where he lost the match and was forced into the main event Mafia, and John Cena had to team up with the Nexus after Wade Barrett defeated him. Then, of course, come the Bella Twins, who decided to settle their lifelong rivalry by forcing the loser to become the other's butler. As we learned, this was all about fetching drinks, laundering clothes, and interfering in matches at the request of their new owner, for lack of a better term. Brie did indeed lose and have to do all of this, as well as turn into a really bad person, because rather than quit the company, she just did everything Nikki Bella said. She was abused for an entire month, and when those 30 days were finally up and she was free to break away, well, she decided to stick around anyway. Because who cares about the story? Number 7, someone's blood. As soon as you heard that word, surely you knew we were going to be talking about WCW, and we absolutely are. I'll do my best. The short version is that David Flair's girlfriend Miss Hancock was pregnant. David wasn't sure if the baby was his and started to think that Buff Bagwell may have been responsible. Mainly because Buff had the stuff. He told us that every week. Rather than sort this out in a normal way, like going to the doctors, Flair and Bagwell had a match instead. If Nature Boy Jr. won, he would get some of Buff's blood, allowing him to get that tested and figure out the results. There are far easier ways, David. Far easier ways. Unfortunately, Bagwell won, meaning all was lost, until Lex Luger arrived on the scene and beat the shit out of him so he could get some of that red goop anyway. It all worked out, unless you were having to watch this as it was absolute garbage. Imagine this kid was real as well, and they watched all of this back years later to find out who their actual father was. Disown the lot of them. Number 6, winner takes all. Bit much really, isn't it? Rather than come to a nice fair answer when two tribes go to war, we just decided to say, right, if you win, awesome, here's all the pie, but if you lose, you get nothing. That's a serious situation. But when in 2001 WCW and ECW invaded WWE and quickly got their collective butts handed to them, it all did come down to the Survivor Series. There's also the fact this was one of the most botched angles in history, but that's for another list down the line. Probably 10 biggest botches in history. Now, if any of this was real, Vince McMahon could have just told these people they were trespassing and had them arrested. He did not. McMahon went for secret option B, which was agreeing to give them his entire company if he lost. That is smart. Because WCW and ECW had been treated so badly, everyone knew what was going to happen here, even more so given that on Team World Championship Wrestling were Steve Austin, Kurt Angle and RVD, three dudes that had been under the WWE banner for some time. If only Sting and Goldberg had been up for this. Vince did walk away the victor, however, and his former rivals slowly crumbled into dust. Number 5, Judy Bagwell on a pole. I mean, what the hell? Back to WCW once more, which the title gave away, I will once again do my best. But yes, Judy Bagwell had been kidnapped by Chris Kanyon, who had also been dressing up as DDP for some reason. The only way for Buff Bagwell to get Judy Bagwell back was to battle Kanyon in a Judy Bagwell on a pole match, except Mrs. Bagwell would be on a forklift because you can't get a human on a pole. Kill me. Please. Another time where logic was thrown out the window, given if your own mother was kidnapped you'd just ring the cops. Here we were meant to accept that Buff was perfectly happy trying to win his mum back like she was anyone's property to begin with. Thankfully the son was the hero on this night and saved Mumsy from the dreaded forklift, but no one won really. We had to watch the damn thing. Also, what was going to happen if Kanyon was victorious? Did he get to keep Judy Bagwell? And if so, what would he do with her? None of this was logical in any sense, and it makes me want to smash my face into the floor. Twice. Number 4, burned or buried alive. Technically, if you do lose a buried alive or an inferno match, you're dead. You can't breathe in a coffin, and fire kills people. So it's another occasion where you probably don't want to agree to these terms just because you have a disliking of someone. It's not worth it. It's handy then that every Inferno match ever has ended with the person who has the most skin covered losing, and somehow that people who get buried alive during wrestling matches can return without a scratch on them. That is literally never explained, meaning all these things are pointless. Where's the risk if no one actually suffers? It would make other sports far more fun though. If I knew the loser of the World Cup is getting thrown into a pit, well, it just brings a nice new dark twist to proceedings. Number 3, death. And here it is, death. The end. The final curtain. Where do we begin? Happening in 1991 at Halloween Havoc and the infamous Chambers of Horrors match, Sting, El Gigante and the Steiner brothers battled Abdullah the Butcher, Diamond Stud, Cactus Jack and Vader. These guys hated each other so much that just getting a pinfall wasn't enough. The only way to win the contest was to strap one of your opponents to an electric chair and then pull the switch. In case you don't know, that is called killing someone. Another stupid ass thing for competitors to sign up for. I guess wrestlers all presume they can win, so it doesn't matter. In the end, it was Abdullah whose brain was fried for good, and he was even wheeled away by some EMTs and apparently put in a morgue. Because, you know, he's dead. And like all deceased people, he then teamed up with Sting the following month at Lethal Lottery. Most troubling of all was that the Chambers of Horrors opened the show. So one of the first things viewers saw was a death. Where the hell do you go after that? Number 2, Paul Bearer's life. Man, The Undertaker is a dick. In the world of pro wrestling, he has not only murdered his own parents, but also tried to kill his own manager as people watched. How did he ever become a babyface after this? At the Great American Bash 2004 though, Taker took on the Dudley Boys in a concrete crypt match. This went down because Bubba and Devon had kidnapped Paul Bearer and threatened to kill him if the Phenom won. Paul Heyman was ready to pull the lever and everything. So it was all quite simple. The Undertaker could just lay down in the middle of the ring and save his friend. That was the only thing on the line here. No belts, no nothing. It just made sense, although quite clearly it didn't. The dead man would not only beat the tag team, but he decided to finish Bearer off anyway and push the switch himself. Never explained, never reasoned, and Paul was back on TV later anyway. Number 1, someone's son. We know Rey Mysterio Jr. as a fan favourite, an amazing luchador, and a man who overcame all the odds to become World Heavyweight Champion. We also know he's a terrible father. The human race is awful as well because, as learned when Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio had a feud in 2005, it's legal to gain custody of a child in a pro wrestling match in Washington DC, or at least that's what I was told here. But yes, genuinely, as Eddie continued to tell Rey his son Dominic was actually his, there was only one thing for it: to settle all this hubbub in a ladder match. Naturally. Thankfully for the young man's mental health, Rey, the man he knew as his father, won, sparing him a lot of anguish as he tried to process what would have happened otherwise. It's not a great look for Mysterio either, who just went along with this. He should have done the opposite, not gone along with it. That's your child, man. What world are we living in?